Ultimately, I think it's going to be farming that causes a constitutional crisis. Because when we're locked out of discussions, not just about the future of our country, but locked out of discussions about the future of our land, the land itself, and what we can do with it, and how we use it, and how we're going to live in it, I think that's going to be a boiling point.
I've been farming here for nearly 30 years now. It's a typical southern uplands livestock farm. We have 100 breeding pedigree shorthorn cows and 450 ewes.
I think it's disingenuous of Patrick to say that no means out and yes means in, when actually the opposite is true.
I think the main thing we felt was we didn't want to come out of Europe because it was very important, and Carey's English and my parents are English, although I was born here, and we felt that we wanted to be part of a bigger world. But in saying that, we always felt that the SNP government were looking after our interests as farmers better than DEFRA would in England. You were always very clear about that we had great representation once we'd had devolution in the farming industry. A massive percentage of our exports go to Europe.
Yeah, and it's part of we were promised at the time that we would only stay in Europe if we stayed in the UK.
And
so that was a promise that was made. Yeah. You know, it contributed for sure.
Like all things in politics, things changed drastically.
British people have spoken, and the answer is we're out.
Remember, we went to vote. Remember the night before we were with friends, we made a joke about, I wonder when they'll announce that, that's the end of the matter and it's we're staying in, and that'll put paid to all this silly nonsense about leaving. But that morning, Carey brought me a cup of tea and he said, "You'll never guess what's happened." I went, "What?" I thought maybe a cow had got out or something. He said that they voted leave. I went, "Oh my God." We cried. For 2 days. It's just unbelievable.
You think back when our parents fought in the war in the 40s, people were starving. That's not that long ago. People in Europe starved and we fought. That's just 10 years before I was born. The CAP was set up for food security. The European Union was set up as a project to encourage cooperation and peace. And I think the CAP was set up for food security. And I think it's been so successful at doing that. Look at the supermarkets now. Look at where we are in terms of our food supplies now. And for sure, it is a massive bureaucratic process, and it's ripe for reform at any one time. It is a huge, cumbersome beast. But if you look at 27 countries trying to feed themselves, manage their land, coordinate things, how could it be anything else but? And I understand entirely why some farmers are critical of the bureaucracy surrounding it. But look at the ambition, look at the success. The thing about agriculture is it's such a long-term process. It needs long-term planning. We are potentially coming out of the CAP without an agricultural policy, without a food policy, without a land use policy. We're just going to ditch it and start again. The threat of exiting the EU and having to conform to WTO regulations, the tariffs for export of sheep meat to Europe would be huge and would potentially decimate our income, slash our income, and those of many, many sheep farmers across Scotland. So I think for sheep farmers and beef farmers as well, but particularly sheep farmers are in a very, very vulnerable position at this moment in time.
I thought we'll need to go. We'll need to leave. We're finished. What we're going to do? It was like, what are we going to do? What can we do? I don't know what we're going to do. And I still don't know what we're going to do.
It's not that we're afraid of change or so dependent on what's been there before and the particular support payments or anything much. Of course, things can change and must change necessarily, but we're in quite a vulnerable situation where tenants, we're not overcapitalised. What we need is to be able to plan. We have to pay the rent, we have to pay the bank, and we have to work for it all.
£350 million a year we don't control goes off to be spent on heaven knows what. Bullfighting in Iberia, for heaven's sake. Do you think that's a legitimate use of English taxpayers, British taxpayers' money? Absolutely not.
It became clear, particularly as the Tory party, Theresa May, she put a hard Brexiteer, the buffoon Johnson, and others in charge.
Andrea Leadsom.
And yet
in charge of our future.
The way it was going with Theresa May and the Conservative Party, they I'm not part of this. I don't want to be part of this. I can't be part of this. These people don't represent who I am and where I want to be.
The First Minister can now formally ask Theresa May for an independence vote.
I hope the United Kingdom government will respect the view of Parliament. This is simply about giving people in Scotland a choice.
SNP, they more and more began to make sense. They were the only one, even the Labour Party felt the bits over the whole thing. And that was, they're as culpable as the Tory party.
Shocking. Look at Corbyn trooping in, agreeing with absolutely everything they said. So absolutely shocking.
And we had quite some sympathy with the Tory party in Scotland at one time, and Ruth Davidson, but she seems to become as cynical and as hardwired as the rest of them.
And the other side haven't told us what would replace the single market. I think there's a misnomer that's been going around, perpetrated largely by the media, that the single market is a binary choice. You're either in it or you're not. Actually, there's lots of
You're either in it or you're not.
So we wrote to David Mundell, who, of course, has been a total disaster and has done nothing whatsoever to reassure farmers in the south of Scotland, or any part of Scotland for that matter, about what the future holds. So we wrote to David Mundell with our concerns that in fact we're facing ruin.
Right. So we are listening. We want to engage with the Scottish Government. We want them to work with us.
And we got, what you'd expect now, the sound bites, the platitudes. We're going to have opportunities, but what they are has not yet been revealed, these opportunities. So we're hoping against hope that our local candidate, Mary McCallan, is going to manage to become our MP.
It's important for everybody to remember on this day that in the referendum on the European Union, the people of Scotland voted by 62% to remain in the European Union. Every single local government area in the country voted to remain in the European Union.
It's shocking the way they're behaving. People talk about a right-wing coup, and that's exactly what it appears to be.
Yes.
And compare that and contrast that with Robertson in Westminster and Nicola Sturgeon here, and the lucidity and the articulation of policy. There is no comparison.
And the integrity, integrity that we've had from the SNP throughout this hellish process. We've had some honesty. We can trust them. There's no doubt in my mind at all that there are only hope.
And they've lied about this here tonight too, and it's not good enough. You deserve the truth. You deserve the truth.
I think that the way that the media has handled Scottish independence and handled Brexit has been frightening. It's been frightening in its bias, in its one-sided agenda pushing, and its closing of debate. We now read The National. Bella Caledonian, we look at Bella Caledonia. I read people's blogs, like We Ginger Doug.
I buy the New European.
We buy the New European sometimes. Wings over Scotland, totally. That's, voice of sanity.
We should be working together to get that right deal for Scotland, that right deal for the UK. So I say that's my job as Prime Minister. And so for that reason, I say to the SNP, now is not the time.
The final straw of understanding Scottish nationalism was when they said, essentially, we don't want to know what you think. 48% of the United Kingdom is to be ignored, in fact, demonised. And in Scotland, your entire country is not to have any say, any voice, any participation in this process at all. Well, wow.
Threats against Britain have been issued by European politicians and officials.
And and these sort of
pathetic.
Noises she makes towards our European neighbours. This isn't diplomacy. This isn't how you get a good deal. This just isn't subtle. There's no subtlety. There's no nuances. This is just bombastic nonsense. I think she's simple.
No deal is better than a bad deal. We have to be prepared to walk out.
So you are prepared to walk away from the European Union with no deal?
No deal is better than a bad deal.
What is a good deal? We had a good deal. We had a perfect arrangement.
The best deal we had.
We could have the best arrangement as possible to have. Mm-hmm. So there is no good deal.
With the sort of talk that's going on, a particular bee I have in my bonnet is about environmental standards and climate change issues. And along with food standards issues, about importing cheap food at any cost. I think this is no way to run a food agriculture policy, never mind an environmental policy. Theresa May is aligning herself potentially with Trump, who, by the sounds of things, is about to back out of the Paris Agreement.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
This is crazy. This is the environmental issues. These are massive, huge things. The Scottish government is being particularly good and particularly diligent about addressing. To align ourselves to American policy at the moment on environmental issues like specifically climate change, is madness.
People have been encouraged to think that farmers are paid to do nothing, set aside. It doesn't exist anymore. Farmers are paid to do nothing, when actually farmers are supported in order to carry on farming because it doesn't make a profit. There would be no farming. Farmers are being supported essentially because consumers can't or won't pay the price of production. It doesn't even cover our costs, what we produce and what we sell. It doesn't cover our costs. Consumers are being supported. And there's good reason for that, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be. Because it's essential, and of course there's big questions about food chains and the length of chains and where the profits are lying, because they're not with farmers. One thing's for sure, and this is one of the issues as well, is that Westminster wants to take over agricultural policy.
A sort of third way, whereby a lot of those powers which are coming back to Westminster aren't grabbed by London but are passed straight to Edinburgh. Do you think this is a reasonable idea? A federal Britain might be the way forward?
That's something that we have to discuss and make sure that we do in a way that doesn't practically impede our own internal market in the UK. And that's why I'm talking about a Brexit process, not just the date on which we actually leave the EU.
Take back control, not just from Europe, but from us. They're going to control agricultural policy, of which they know nothing. They know nothing of us. They're not supportive. They don't understand local conditions. Well, considering that at the moment, from the CAP, Scotland has the lowest payment per hectare of all 28 member states now, and they tell us that's fair. They're telling us that's fair. Farmers are going to be pretty desperate, pretty angry. Very, very disappointed that promises of support and commitment to farming are going to turn out to be completely empty. What will happen, leaving us aside, what will happen to thousands of managed acres in Scotland without farmers? I just can't imagine.
It's about food security. It's about our most intimate association with the environment we live in, our food.
It's also about new clearances. That'll be the next thing.
Yeah, it's about people,
It's
culture.
about clearances. It's about the land will be cleared, not just us, not just farmers themselves and their tiny workforces, apart from the people that come to help from the rest of Europe. It's about the whole rural economy, including all the people who support agriculture, who are involved in agriculture. How can they live? How can they live? How can they live here? when we're being decimated, or we're certainly under serious threat of being decimated. So it's going to be like they're just going to, it's going to be a wipeout potentially.